Are these 5 underrated reasons why XRP could skyrocket in 2030? We are going to look at this Reddit post breaking down some reasons why they think XRP is going to be a great long-term hold, and we're going to bring some data to some of these questions too. So we want to look at this because I am an XRP fan. I've enjoyed it for a while. I do hold some, and I think sometimes people maybe over-index on certain things around XRP. So we are going to dive into all that on today's Frugal BC. By the way, guys, if you like this stuff, please hit that like and subscribe button. Now remember, you don't have to smash it. You can just actually press it ever so gently and it works just fine that way too. By the way, brief shout out to our sponsors, Non-Fungible Domains, for that .algo address, and Marcus Aurelius, an NFT and meme coin project on the Algorand blockchain. Just want to give a brief shout out since this is a non-Algorand video. You can check them out in the description below. By the way, also we have channel memberships for anyone interested for some extra content and for getting these videos before anyone else. We have different options, so check that out in the description. But enough of that, let's get to this post because I think this is really interesting. Some people, I see a lot of stuff about XRP, and I think this summarizes a lot of the main arguments about why XRP might be a good investment going out 5 years. And I thought that's a really interesting one to break down. Now, I know I punched up the title a little bit, and that's just what you got to do on YouTube. That's how it works. That's the algorithm. But I like to be a little more analytical with this stuff and a little less shouty. So the the title will bring you in, but we're gonna dive into this post and just kind of break it down a little bit. So let's get into it. All right, so I want to make this nice and big. 5 reasons why XRP could be considered a strong buy and hold candidate over the next 5 years. And actually, like I said, I do own XRP. I've owned it for a while. Yeah, I've enjoyed the recent price increase going from I bought a lot at 53 cents or so, and it being over $2 even right now, I believe, is pretty nice. So let's dive into these reasons. Real world utility and cross-border payments. And I have a lot of thoughts about cross-border payments, so let's dive in here. Unlike many tokens chasing hype, XRP has long been used to solve an actual pain point: international money transfers. Banks and payments providers use it to move money across borders faster and cheaper. If this continues to scale, XRP could be steady, real demand, not just speculation. Now, I really do like when real world utility is being used, not just for cross-border payments, for all kinds of stuff. One of the reasons I do a lot of content on Algorand is because it's actually being used for real world stuff, like minting airline tickets and providing a PayPal like DApp that people use in Afghanistan, so people who don't have access to banks can actually still pay their bills and transact in the world. It's pretty cool, and they're expanding, so I'm excited about that kind of stuff. So yeah, this is really cool. So and I'm glad they didn't mention ISO 20022 because that is one of the biggest misnomers in all of crypto. So I did long videos on this. I've spoken to people in Algorand about this who are one of the coins that are named, and they say it's basically nonsense. It takes a little unpacking. I've even seen stuff from an XRP engineer, an ex-XRP engineer to be clear, who said the same thing. Like there's no compliance with ISO. It's just a bank messaging standard. Now a DApp that is using an underlying crypto could use that, and probably would use that standard, use that syntax in their DApp, but it would happen at the protocol level, at the application level, not the protocol. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. But yeah, so I want to dive into this a little bit with this cross-border payments, because I was like, well, how much is it actually being used? And it is being used, but more often than not, it's actually Ripple's technology, but not necessarily XRP itself being used. So let's dive into this here. This post says, "Are banks using XRP? The truth behind Ripple's banking partnerships." So I think this is definitely interesting. Ripple and its currency XRP have been at the center of discussions regarding the future of cross-border payments and banking infrastructure. Many headlines and articles claim that banks are using XRP. The reality is far more nuanced, which we just covered. While Ripple has partnered with several financial institutions worldwide, not all of them are leveraging XRP in their operations. Instead, many are using RippleNet, Ripple's enterprise blockchain network, which does not require XRP. So that's a really key distinction. Now, that doesn't mean this isn't valuable, but if you're really worried about how this is going to impact XRP's prices, Ripple will become more valuable, and that could also still make XRP more valuable as sort of like a stock of the company in some aspects. But I think that is a really key distinction. They are right. Yeah, so they distinguish it RippleNet as an X current, X via, X rapid, ODL. There's some breakdown here. We don't have time to dive into all this, but that's the RippleNet version. And then there's on-demand liquidity, which does require XRP. And actually on this one, on RippleNet, X Rapid actually does use XRP. So I wanted to highlight this one little section, and we're not going to, go through all of this, but just briefly, when you look at the ones that are using RippleNet but not XRP, that's American Express, Santander Bank, Bank of America, PNC Bank, and JP Morgan Chase. Now, these are all ones you've heard of, and they got to be really careful. So they're not using the XRP. Okay. Right now, we're in a period where the Trump administration is exploring this. And I think when we get regulatory clarity, this might change. And we've already had Jay Powell come out and say that, banks can start using crypto. But I think until the rules are super clarified, I don't think you're going to see a lot of this. Now, institutions that are using XRP, we have Tranglo, SBI Remit, Frankenmuth Credit Union, and Ripple's own liquidity hub. So that's fine. And, they are being used for cross-border payments. But a lot of these, I haven't heard of Tranglo or SBI Remit or Frankenmuth Credit Union, but it's not. It's actually, that's a US-based financial institution. Interesting. That allows their members to buy and sell XRP. That's pretty cool. But they're kind of the exception here right now, right? So that's something that's really important to keep in mind. Now, Japan has been one of the biggest adopters of Ripple's technology. I saw something about this. Over 80% of Japanese banks are expected to integrate Ripple's solutions by 2025. Well, that sounds really great, except, well, as they say, while this sounds bullish, most of them are using RippleNet, not necessarily XRP. So we got that same problem where they're using RippleNet, but not necessarily XRP itself, which means it's not going to have that liquidity increase that you'd like to see when a company starts using it. Japan's SBI Holdings has been a vocal advocate for XRP adoption. However, Japan's SBI Holdings has been a vocal advocate for XRP adoption, making Japan a potential hotspot for future XRP transactions. So there's definitely some potential there, and they kind of talk about the regulatory clarity, cost savings and efficiency, etc. There's other alternatives too. I know Hedera and Algorand are both being tested by the Bank of Italy, I believe. Bank of Italy is using it for the sureties markets. It's using Algorand right now. So I mean, they have competition. Don't pretend like this is the only game in the only game in town. And that matters. That doesn't mean it will lose. It just means it's not the only game in town, and I think that's important to keep in mind. All right, so if let's get to the next reasons. Ripple's legal clarity compared to other tokens. After years of battling the SEC, Ripple scored a partial win that helped define XRP as not inherently a security. I think that's important. Yeah, no, for sure. But we also have an environment where the SEC has taken a much more hands-off approach to crypto, and I think that's happening while the crypto summit and the crypto task force is kind of figuring out what to do with crypto now. So I think we're going to see positive momentums as regulators tighten the screws on crypto. See, I don't think they're going to, though. That's the thing. I don't think they're going to. XRP already having some legal precedent puts it ahead of the curve and could give it more staying power than some rivals. I understand why they're making that argument. I would argue XRP kind of paved the way for, a lot of other coins like Algorand, HBAR, maybe SWI. I think they actually set the tone to some degree. So big shout out to XRP in Ripple for paving the way, so to speak. But no, I think I think that has some legitimacy. But I also think it'll be good. I think it's a rising tide lifts all boats kind of a situation personally. And also, like, the regulators right now are really looking at how to set those rules. So I think they're going to be looking at it systematically, not necessarily coin by coin. Ripple's expanding global partnerships. Now this one I'm kind of skeptical about, but let's read it first. Ripple isn't just talking the talk. They've inked partnerships with financial institutions all over the world, from Japan to Middle East to Latin America. The more these partners integrate Ripple's technology, the more likely XRP sees actual utility and not just market noise. And this is the reason that I like utility coins. That's why I focus on, obviously not as much on XRP. I'm trying to add more XRP content, but Algorand, HBAR, SWI, I like the utility. I like what they're doing. They're trying to solve real world problems instead of, just be about speculation. But I think you got to be really careful with partnerships, because partnerships it's such a broad range of what that can actually mean. Sometimes it's these, it's basically exchanging logos on each other's website at the one extreme end, and at the other extreme end, it's like they're both an important part of each other's business and everything in between. So just saying partnerships isn't necessarily very convincing to me, because I've seen that go the other way. The next one, limited supply and predictable emissions. Now, I actually have some skepticism on this too, and I'll explain why. But let's read. XRP has a maximum supply of 100 billion tokens, most of which are already created. That gives it a degree of predictability, especially when compared to tokens that keep minting more over time. For long-term holders, that kind of supply discipline matters. Here's the thing though. Here's the thing. So Ethereum has, an unlimited supply, and maybe they manage emissions really well, but it's worth like, 1,800 today, I think, maybe 1,700. And it's been as high as like what, 4,000? I can't remember the top of Ethereum right now off the top of my head. And what you see, I've seen so many coins that break this rule. So you might think, yeah, oh, if the max supply and most of it's out, like that should be a good thing. And honestly, I haven't seen it may have a huge impact on price, or at least I'll say I've seen so many exceptions. Algorand also has most of its supply out. It's 10 billion tokens, so far fewer, yet the price has kind of lagged. And then you have something like SWI where, it's pretty much a brand new coin. The supply there's a lot of supply left to come out yet, and the price has been skyrocketing, beating all of the ones I've mentioned today: XRP, Hedera, Algorand. SWI has like outpumped them all. It's just skyrocketing. So I don't think this is a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, it's not the slam dunk you might think it is. Potential beneficiary of a tokenized financial system. As the world edges closer to tokenizing traditional assets like stocks, bonds, even real estate, XRP is well positioned to be one of the bridges between fiat and crypto. If Ripple can carve out a slice of that feature, early holders of XRP could benefit big. Well, there's a lot of competition for that. Ondo Finance, for instance, has specifically focused on financial markets. I just heard the founder of Ondo talking on a space, and he was talking about how they focused on treasuries, tokenized treasuries. You can already get that on there. Algorand has the first New York Stock Exchange listed company, Exodus, has its stock tokenized on Algorand already. So they're the first out of the gate. Now, that doesn't mean that this could be good for XRP. I just don't know that they have necessarily a competitive advantage or even a first mover advantage in this case. So maybe, but the fact that it's focusing specifically on banking and is starting to get adoption, I think that's the bigger lever and the one that XRP holders should focus on, frankly. All right, so what does that all mean? Now, listen, I'm a big fan of XRP and I like the focus on banking specifically. I think blockchains that really try to solve specific problems will probably be the most successful. So do I think XRP is a good long-term hold? Yeah, actually I do. I think it'll be one of the strong leaders in the space. It's already got a really high market cap. It's really worked its way up. And so that's awesome. Great to see. So yeah, I'm a fan of XRP, but I'd love to hear what you think about these. Is there anything you think I missed? Leave it in the comments below. And by the way, when you leave these comments, please try to say what you're referring to, because sometimes people will react to one little section in the video, but they don't say what that is. So I don't know what they're actually talking about. So I would recommend doing that. But otherwise, thanks for watching. I'd love to hear your feedback and what you think about XRP, or is there a coin that you think will do better? Let me know that too in the comments below. Otherwise, I'm Frugalnauts. I hope you're doing well out there, and I'll see you in the future.